A number of international brands have pulled their adverts from YouTube. It's in response to a UK investigation that found the video sharing site running ads next to inappropriate videos of children. So how should we police online content? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. YouTube is the world's most popular video sharing site. 1.5 billion users watch and upload videos on the website, which makes it a natural fit for advertisers. But the company has come under fire after a UK-based newspaper found adverts running alongside inappropriate videos of children and comments. The Times investigation found there were many videos of pre-teen girls which were then liked and commented on by hundreds of paedophiles. One such clip of a young girl drew 6.5 million views. Well, several companies, including chocolate maker MARS and Deutsche have pulled their ads from YouTube, which is owned by Google. The newspaper said the site had allowed sexualised imagery of children to be easily searchable. It also criticised the company for not monitoring its content. In a statement, Deutsche Bank said, "We take this matter very seriously and suspended the advertising campaign as soon as we became aware of it." As always, our digital marketing agency applied filters to prevent our advertising appearing alongside inappropriate content, and we're now investigating how the situation arose. Well, chocolate maker Mars also said, "We have taken the decision to immediately suspend all our online advertising on YouTube and Google globally. Until we have confidence that appropriate safeguards are in place, we will not advertise on YouTube and Google." Well, in response, a YouTube spokesman said there shouldn't be any ads running on this content, and we are working to urgently fix this. Well, the Times newspaper spoke to a member of Google's Volunteer Trusted Flagger programme, which monitors inappropriate content on the site. Now, he said that just 3 unpaid volunteers were responsible for rooting out child inappropriate content. Now, the flaggers say there are at least 50,000 active predators on YouTube and that the company is aware of the scale of the problem. The Trusted Flaggers told The Times that they have reported over 12,000 predators to YouTube since August. OK, well, let's bring in our panel now. And joining us in London, Nishanth Sastry, a senior lecturer in Informatics at King's College in London. In Reading, in the UK, Susan Rose, a marketing and reputation expert at Henley Business School. And joining us via Skype from Malmö in Sweden, Aral Bulkan, who describes himself as a cyborg rights activist. Well, very warm welcome to all of you. Aral, I'm going to start with you. First of all, just very briefly tell us what is a cyborg activist?
Well, a cyborg rights activist is basically someone who defends the rights of human beings in a digital age. Our relationship to technology today is that of a cyborg to its organs. So when I use a phone, I extend my mind, and thereby I extend myself using that phone. When I store a thought, not just in my head, but on my phone. So it makes perfect sense to include that phone within the boundaries of myself, and by consequence, to protect it within human rights law. So things like surveillance then become an abuse of the self, which I think is a very important point going forward if we want to protect personhood in the digital age. So that's why I call myself a cyborg rights activist. It's not because I have implants. It's because I believe that anyone who uses modern technology today is a cyborg.
OK, so in that context, then, what is your view on this subject? Seeing these adverts over inappropriate content, and this particular inappropriate content is scantily clad young girls and boys.
It's horrible, but we have to understand what the core problem here is. And the core problem is that YouTube and Google and Facebook, they would like us to believe that they're public spaces. They would want us to believe that they're parks. But what they really are shopping malls. They're privately owned. They're owned and controlled by these corporations. In the case of YouTube, Alphabet Incorporated. And of course, Alphabet Incorporated is responsible for whatever is displayed in its premises. But they want us to believe that they're a public place. They're not. It's privately owned, and this has ramifications for both our human rights, because of course their business model is based on advertising, but not traditional advertising, surveillance-based advertising, ad tech, in tracking and profiling everything that you do. So this has ramifications for our human rights, and it has ramifications for free speech and democracy. What does it mean that we no longer have public space anymore in the digital age, that all of our public places are privately owned?
OK, well, Susan, following on from that then, if as Aral says, YouTube is responsible for what's displayed, why are we seeing these adverts appearing over these particular videos?
Well, Laura, I'm not a technical expert on how that happens in terms of the algorithms and so on, but I believe it happens because platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, Google, etc., haven't yet accepted the responsibility that their business model gives them. We just heard there that the business model is very different from the traditional advertising model that held prior to the internet's arrival. So prior to that, the brand owner had a lot of control over where their advertising would be placed, when, how, and so on. And what we see now are, in effect, what they call themselves are tech companies. Facebook, Google, and so on view themselves as tech companies, but they're not. They are media companies. They're media owners, and they are placing advertising and taking money. So their customer is not you and I who post our pictures onto Facebook or put our video on YouTube. Their customers are these global brands who are paying lots of money. And I think that they haven't quite recognised their responsibility as a media owner who provides that platform.
OK, but to what extent, Susan, does the responsibility also lie with these companies which are using these platforms, it's a great platform, for their adverts?
There is some responsibility on their part. As I say, from a technical point of view, you would have to speak to a digital agency or maybe one of our other guests about how technically that happens. But in effect, they should know where their advertising is being placed. They should know the websites that it's appearing on. It pops up, as we all know, on banners and so on. But my understanding is that they don't always have total control. I think the big change that's gone on with regard to digital marketing from traditional marketing, as we might call it before the internet arrived, is that the measure of control has shifted and maybe shifted away from the brand owner. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is the brand owners making a big statement that they want to wrestle back that control and be the ones that state where their advertising, their PR messages are appearing. I believe that the idea that it's public versus private is an important one. And we all use Facebook, but it's free to us. And I think that a lot of consumers, individual members of the public don't realise how much what they put up publicly doesn't belong to them after a while. It belongs to the tech companies who use it as a mechanism with the demographics that go with it to actually sell space to advertisers. So every time you tell Facebook or any of these platforms your date of birth, your location, whether you're in a relationship or not, all of these nuggets of information get used by the large brands through their digital agencies to decide where to place their advertising. And I think there's a responsibility on the part of the brands and also on the part of the platform itself to know where those will appear. I don't think actually this is just an issue for big brands. I think we should all be horrified that this kind of content is even appearing on these platforms.
Absolutely, that is the bigger issue here. And we'll certainly, I hope to touch on that a little later in this discussion. I also want to touch on the impact of companies withdrawing their advertising on companies like YouTube. But first of all, Nishanth, it's been raised a couple of times that we're not actually sure about the technology behind placing adverts on certain content on YouTube. Are you able to shed some light on that? How do adverts get placed?
So this is a very complicated algorithm that gets used to decide which advertisement gets placed with which content. So essentially what happens is the content has some properties associated with it. And you, the user who is viewing the content, also have some properties such as your age, your demographics, where you are from, and so forth. And the advertisers say, I want certain kinds of content on which my ads should be placed. But perhaps more importantly, advertisers would like to target certain demographics, so certain age groups or certain genders or whatever. And based on a combination of these factors, and also based on a combination of which advertiser actually really wants that user who is viewing the video right now the most, so who is willing to pay the most for that particular slot on that particular video, an advertiser does get placed. And there's actually an online auction which happens in many cases in order to decide which advertiser gets the slot. So that's perhaps one of the most complicated but sophisticated technologies that we have.
Okay, I just want to jump in there because can you help me then to understand how, for example, we're looking at companies like Deutsche Bank here, how that advert would end up perhaps on a video of a pre-teenager wearing a nightie. How do those two match up?
Yes. So the efficacy with which this auction runs depends a lot on how accurate the information is. Now, maybe I have told Google that I'm actually a child who is 13-year-old, and then if I'm watching a child's video, then a child's ad might be put in front of me. Google might also have made inferences based on the sites that I visit. Now, if it so happens that I have a little child and that child is viewing a lot of childlike videos, maybe cartoons or whatever, on my YouTube account, Google might very well think that I'm a little child, even if I haven't told exactly what my age is. And when I go off and watch something, then it shows me ads that are appropriate for a child. Now imagine the exact opposite thing happening. If I and my child are both watching using the same account, and then if she goes on my YouTube account, then she might see an ad that's only should be shown to an adult. So there's mismatches that can happen because of inaccuracies in information. Now, another thing which could happen is that Deutsche Bank might just be saying, oh, I just want someone who is within a particular age range, without necessarily saying, I don't want to place ads on a certain class of videos. Now, if that's the case, it's the set of all videos that match their criterion that their ad would be considered for. And it could happen that some of them are highly inappropriate. It could be extremist videos, or it could be child pornography, unfortunately.
Aral, how damaging is this for YouTube's image?
Well, it's damaging, but it's not like it hasn't happened before. I mean, this keeps happening with maybe even increasing frequency. And every time it does, we see a couple of brands go, oh, we're going to suspend our advertising on this platform. And then they go back. I mean, part of the problem is we don't have alternatives. They're not called platform monopolies for nothing. They're monopolies. And I think we also have to really take a step back and look at this greater business model and ask ourselves whether this is the kind of world we want to live in the future, where we are not citizens but consumers. And more than that, we're like livestock to be farmed, because that's what's happening here. You know, we're being tracked across the web. Google, for example, is one of the biggest trackers on the web. 70 to 80% of websites, when you're browsing them, track you. Google can track you across those websites. You're profiled, and then you're auctioned off. So, you know, is this model what we want for the future? Because it's not the only way to build technologies. We can build technologies that are owned and controlled by people. These are decentralized systems. We can build them in a way in which they're verifiable, in which the algorithms are transparent, in which the code that actually makes them up is free and open so anyone can look at them. So we know how to build ethical technologies. We're not building them because of Silicon Valley's business model, which I call people farming, which is an exploitative, extractive model. So I think there's a greater conversation to be had here, you know, about this whole business model in general and the kind of effect it's having on society.
Okay, I mean, Susan, like it or not, I mean, it seems that YouTube is here to stay. It's a huge company. It's a huge platform. And as Aral was saying just then, we did have this situation just some months ago, back in March, where adverts appeared next to videos of hate speech. And some of those companies that threw up their arms in horror and withdrew are now back 7 months later, advertising very happily on YouTube again.
Yes, and I agree with the previous speaker that unfortunately what we have now is a near monopoly of a very few number of very, very large they call themselves tech companies. I think mostly Facebook, Google, YouTube like to think of themselves as tech companies, and as I said before, in actual fact, they are monopolizing now the platform for the voice, the voice of business, but other voices as well, non-commercial voices that want to have a say. It has been, social media has become the communication mechanism that we have, and the channels need to be more diverse. That they remain as they are at the moment, and as we know, television itself has had a big reduction in terms of its advertising spend as this shifts over to digital. And I agree that until we can somehow change that model, I don't think that anybody really intentionally developed the model. Facebook emerged. It emerged in a very different form when it first was started by Mark Zuckerberg, but it has become now the main channel. And I think that what is really at stake here is reputation. That is the word that I would use, that people are concerned about. I don't believe these brands are doing this for any kind of commercial reason in terms of PR or anything like that. They're doing it because they know that this is hugely damaging to their reputation. And these days, social responsibility, or what we sometimes call corporate social responsibility, is hugely important to big brands. It's no longer just about selling products or services. It's also about how you're viewed by your whole stakeholders, not just your customers, but your employees, your shareholders,
have to jump in with the point here that YouTube back in March did say that it would review its policies, and yet it seems as if nothing has changed, and yet the companies are back. So really, how much do they actually care?
Yes. Well, I believe that there won't be change until these brands make more of a stance, even more of a stance than they're doing now. As you say, just pulling out for a short period and then going back on is not going to do it. There needs to be a really significant, I think, quite collective response by large global organisations to say, we won't do business with you. We will perhaps revert back for a period of time to the more traditional channels. And until they actually make a longer-term stance against the likes of Facebook, or sit down with Facebook and Google and these companies and say, we're not happy about this model, and we're not happy about the kind of lessening of control that we've got over where our brands appear. We need to be able to, I think, pull back the balance of power.
Nishanth, how much does YouTube actually care about this? I mean, that graphic that I read before about the trusted flaggers, a group of volunteers who scour the web, scour YouTube for inappropriate content, specifically looking, just 3 of them, specifically looking for child abuse, or that kind of grey area where children are being abused by the videos that are being put up. The whistleblower there said that YouTube knows about the scale of this problem, that there are some 50,000 active predators on its site, but are not doing anything about it.
I think they are doing quite a bit about these kind of things. So there should be teams of people. I'm not sure if YouTube in particular has something, but I know that lots of tech companies have large teams of people looking at it. And the whole program of Trusted Flaggers, if I understand it correctly, is a volunteer program. So if people volunteer, if people feel that this is an important issue for them, they can volunteer and help flag up inappropriate content. And we've seen this happen, in a very successful manner with Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is the largest encyclopedia of humanly known content, and it's all completely volunteer organized and volunteer owned. So what I think we need is basically a huge increase in the numbers of this Trusted Flaggers program that consists of concerned members of the public.
Why should it fall to volunteers, though? Why wouldn't YouTube, a huge company that makes an enormous amount of money, not regulate itself?
Well, I think they should, if they're not, and I think they are, but if they're not, they should be having a team of people looking at it. But I think in the end, what it comes down to is it's a problem of scale. So what they've enabled people to do is any producer of content, anybody who puts up who makes a video, can put it up on this platform. And this is actually one of the biggest positive things that we are missing in this whole debate, is that, not in this particular debate, but in the debate around who owns the content and the platform or the producer and so forth, is that if I see something wrong going on, if I see, let's say, somebody being mugged or something in the middle of London, I can take a video of it and then put it up online. People have done that. People have done that with things like cyclists being abused by car drivers. There are lots of videos up there which show these kind of injustices happening. And now, if it were up to the BBC or Al Jazeera, it might come down to an editorial decision on whether or not that particular abuse would fit on a 30-minute time slot or whatever. But YouTube doesn't have this restriction, which just means that
there is the other point, though. So it can't control what gets uploaded. But there is the other point, isn't there, Aral, that the Times was saying that the videos here, the sexualized images of these children, are far too easily searchable, that the barriers aren't in place. And then once you get one video up, the algorithms then throw up a whole list of more videos where you can see all sorts of things, from toddlers naked in the bath to, as I mentioned before, a preteen in her nightie rolling around on the bed. So there's just nothing that stops these videos perpetuating.
I mean, that is a detail of the system that YouTube has built. I guess, again, the bigger question here is, what are we asking these large monopolies to do? Part of it is, I think there's a call for more of a paternalistic approach where we are sheltered from certain things, and I totally agree. When you talk about something as horrendous as possibly, content of little children that is inappropriate, that's very clear. We don't want that, right? But it doesn't end there either. What are we asking them to be? We are asking them to be better censors. We're asking them to take many more decisions. They already do. All these timelines are algorithmic, as you said. So they decide what we see and what we don't see. And if we agree that most of our news is coming from these platforms, from Facebook, et cetera, and you see what's happening with, for example, Google reducing the importance of posts from RT because the U.S. government doesn't agree with RT or thinks it's a foreign agent. So, Google, being a U.S. company, reduces their importance in their news feeds. What kind of, again, world are we heading towards? So if they do their jobs really well and they start becoming really great at censorship as well, maybe for content you don't agree with, but maybe also for things that the U.S. government doesn't agree with.
Sure.
Maybe, something that Al Jazeera is going to put out is going to be deemed inappropriate at some point. We're asking them to be arbiters of reality, arbiters of truth. And I think, again, this is a greater question. Are we comfortable with a handful of Silicon Valley companies being the arbiters of truth for the world at large? I'm not.
OK. I mean, given that argument, Susan, do you think it's safer then for companies to withdraw from advertising on social media altogether, given its unpredictable nature? Is this just simply not a platform where companies should go?
Well, I think that they have got to the position now where they have to sort of stand up. They have to stand up and kind of push back on the tech digital platforms and start to come to some kind of mutual agreement about what we've just heard the speaker talk about, that this is a mutual responsibility that we all share. I don't think we should put the onus totally on the digital platforms, although they do have a responsibility. I think that brands have always had a responsibility, social responsibility about the things they say and do and so on. But I think also we as individuals who use these platforms, we as parents, parents should be responsible about how their children are using them. We as individuals and what we put on. And I think that everybody has to become much more aware that everything you post is out there now. It's public and it's a statement. And this, I'm quite horrified at some of the things I sometimes see on social media. And I really wonder whether people realise where that's going, who's going to see it and how it's going to be used. So I think there's a three-way responsibility here. There's those people that put the content up, be they individuals or organisations. There's the platforms themselves. And I also do think that there is a sort of governmental level of responsibility. These kind of social platforms started off as a really quite innovative and new way of having a social space for people to communicate and talk and so on. And they have become commercialised without a doubt. And once we move into a commercial and now political position for these spaces, I think it's become bigger than just saying, You know, it's easy to blame the
Okay.
brands and blame them because they're paying the money. But I don't think that it's as simple as that.
Okay.
We've all got to take mutual
I think we will
responsibility
have
for
to
this.
leave the discussion there with the thought that responsibility belongs to all of us. It's all of ours. Thank you all very much for joining us. Nishanth, Sastry, Susan Rose and Aral Volkan. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, do go to our Facebook page if you dare. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, bye for now.